Next up, we have the man, the myth, the legend. There's Dan Lenton from Unify.ai, who's coming to talk to you both about how you can use that with Vertex and other models in the Google ecosystem from the other side. And Dan will also take some questions, and then we're going to have to let him go because he's off to do a podcast, because he's very sought after, and you're very lucky. So Dan, off to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Too kind. Yeah, really great to be here, and it's obviously a really awesome initiative, so really happy to be a part of it. So yeah, I mean, to start with, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing as a company, but to be honest, I think I'll kind of go through that and then really focus the rest of the talk on how you can get spun up very quickly and easily inside a Jupyter Notebook to get access to all of the different models and providers, quickly prototype with them, test them out, and see which are the most suitable for building your application on top of. Because there's a lot of topics that are, I suppose, a little bit more high level and a bit more advanced, and I'm trying to keep this quite reined in and really just showing how you can get started very quickly and easily, basically. But on a high level, what we're doing at Unify is we've built a dynamic router that basically makes it possible to use the very best model and provider on every prompt. So I'm sure people are aware that there's lots of models coming out from OpenAI, there's lots of models coming out from Anthropic, Llama 3.1 came out recently. There's a ton of different models, a ton of providers, each of which are better in different domains and so on, and it's very complicated to know which model you should be thinking about using for each individual use case. And actually, there isn't one model that's best at everything. Each model has its own specialities in different subdomains and so on. So really, the best approach actually is to take the prompts and send each prompt to the most appropriate LLM on a prompt-by-prompt basis to get the very best performance. And this is what we've built with our dynamic router. Now, I wouldn't suggest that for these projects that you're doing now, probably the best place to start is just using one of these models, and actually using Gemini is a good approach, particularly seeing as there's a lot of infrastructure built around Vertex AI. But when you really deploy these things at scale, you can then start to get massive cost savings and speed improvements when you then start to leverage some of these smaller models at scale as well. So the first thing that Unify makes it easy to do is use any model with any provider. So literally, for those that are familiar with Python, we have a Python package where you just do from Unify import Unify, you then specify the model at provider, and then you can just do unify.generate and you get the response from this model and provider pairing. And we've standardized this so that the API of all of the different models and providers is the same, so you don't need to worry about having different credits and different API keys in different formats and so on, so it's very easy to get started. Other things we've built are benchmarking, so it's very easy to compare all of these different models and providers to see which are the fastest, which are the cheapest, which are the highest quality, and view all of these in a very simple dashboard to get a high-level view of how am I going to be trading off these competing factors of the cost, the quality, and the speed, and to quickly and intuitively visualize all of these. But what I'll kind of blast through these, and what I'll then start to do is just show you exactly how you can get started, because obviously this is a very practical session, and being able to dive in after this talk and get started will be the best. So I explained, though, the dynamic routing, where you can combine all the LLMs for faster, cheaper, better responses. Again, the idea is bringing all of these different models and providers together. It's very modular, so you can easily combine the models in whatever way you want. We're continually integrating the latest runtime speeds so that you have every single model and provider is tested every 3 hours in every continent, so that you're always having the latest speeds, because these things actually change over time. Any given provider might suddenly be really slow one day, then really fast the next day, so you want to have the latest data for doing this. And you can also do this on your own cloud as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing as a company. But again, bringing things into a slightly more concrete demo. So for those that are going to start shortly prototyping with the projects, the way that you can get access to all these models and providers very quickly is just by doing pip install Unify.ai. I'll share this notebook after the talk as well. So just this Python package for those that are familiar with Python. And then what you can do is import Unify, like so. And then and we also do some imports for the management of secrets and for visualization here as well. And the first thing you can see is all of the different models and all the different models that are supported by Unify. So you can just do unify.utils.list models. Let me just zoom in a little bit here, maybe 1 second. I'm not sure how big it is on the screen. There we go. So you can just do unify.utils.list models, and then just sort these and then print them all. And just looking at this list, you get a feel for how many different models and providers there are. Of course, Gemini, very strong ones from Google. We've also got the Gemma models here, but there's all the GPTs, there's the Llamas, the Mistrals, etc., etc. Lots of choice and a list that only continues to grow. And then for each of the models, there are providers as well. So just, maybe this is some stuff that people already know, but just to explain the difference between a model and a provider, the models are the neural network architectures. So GPT-4 is a model. This happens to be a model that only has one provider, OpenAI, because it's not open. But there are other models which are open source, like the Llama models. Llama 3.1 came out recently, for example. And this is open source, which means that anyone that wants to is able to host this model and provide their own cost and their own endpoint to be able to query this. So each model may have one or many providers that actually expose that model and make it available. So what you can do here is just list all of the models that are supported and all of the providers. So we see, for example, that Gemma, this is a Google model, is supported by Vertex AI, of course, but it's also supported by Grok, which is this hardware company to make things very runtime efficient. Fireworks AI as well. A lot of the old PyTorch team have made a company to kind of, again, get very fast performance. Again, Gemma 7B has lots of options, any scale, deep infra, etc. And all of these, again, have different costs, different speeds, etc., which are really useful to be able to compare against when you're deploying AI applications at scale. But just to get started and play around, really, the best way to get started is just to list all these out and just to start playing around, basically. So what you can do here is create a client. And again, I'll be sharing this notebook afterwards. So basically, you do unify.unify, you specify this model at provider pair. In this case, we're looking at Gemma 1.5 on Vertex AI. You pass your API key in here as well. This is something actually in Google Colab you can very easily add just here on the left. So basically, you can add a secret, you give it a name, give it a value. In this case, it's our Unify key, which I'll actually just quickly show you how you get started with this. So you just go to unify.ai, and then you basically go to this top right, which will say sign in, and then you go to the API tab, and you have your API key here. I'll go through the process quickly just to show you what it actually looks like. So if I just quickly sign out, basically you'll have this button that says sign in. You then continue with Google, use Google authentication, select your Google account, and then you're logged in, get your API key, copy it like so, and then just paste it into here, give it the name Unify key, give access to the notebook, and then you'll be able to use your Unify key directly in your Google Colab as follows. So then if we run this, we set the client to be using Gemini 1.5 at Vertex AI, and then we can ask any question, write me some Python code to find the 14th percentile from a multi-dimensional array. Wasn't feeling very creative this morning, so that's my question. And here we have the code, so it provides the code here at the top. We get an explanation as well, so we import NumPy, define the function, filter the array, calculate the percentile, and return the result. So yeah, really, really comprehensive and good answer. But we can then easily just test another model. Well, what about Gemini 1.5 Flash? Does that do the same? Let's have a look. Again, all we need to do is set the endpoint. So let me just zoom in there. So you've already created the client. You can then easily just change it to any of these endpoints we listed before. Again, we're focusing on Gemini and Vertex AI, but you can change this to Claude 3 at Anthropic or whatever, just to start playing around with all of these different models and providers. You put the question in, get the response, and in this case, again, we see that it does well. I think Gemini 1.5 Flash and Pro, both very competent models, almost word for word, exactly the same response. So again, giving us a good answer. So that's the starting point with just being able to very quickly play with all of the different models and providers across the board without needing to create lots of different API keys, lots of different accounts, lots of different installation packages and so on, just a single portal to access everything. Any questions on that so far? If anyone's brave enough to ask questions, hopefully it was all clear enough.
I've got one quick question.
Sure.
So, of course, prompt engineering is still a thing.
Yeah.
So with access to all of these models, what do you do to, how do you, if you can, ensure that the outputs are still going to be as good as if if I switch from ChatGPT today to Claude or something, maybe it's going to be way better, right? Zero shot, but maybe it's going to be worse. So how do you test that? What do you do?
Yeah, so this is where, there's 2 points there. Also, just for anyone that didn't hear the full question, prompt engineering is very important, and often the prompts that you engineer are quite model specific as well. So it's not like you can engineer a prompt that then covers all models very easily, and it might degrade performance when you then change the model. So actually, this is where our benchmarking platform, again, slightly more advanced topic probably for today, but basically it's very easy for you to upload your own prompt data set. So let's say you have a test set of 500 prompts that represents your task. You can upload that data set and then run LLMs as a judge to evaluate how good that model was performing. And actually, this is what these data points represent. So when you log into your account and you get this dashboard, we can change the benchmark from OpenHermes, HelloSwag, MLU, all these different standard LLM data sets, and you have this quality on the y-axis, and this is basically based on GPT-4 as a judge, assessing how good the model is. So you can see, the cheap models are towards the left, the high-performing models are high up, so the sweet spot, cheap and high quality, is up in this corner. But basically, the way we do that is by using LLMs as a judge to evaluate how good the responses are. We're actually in the process of generalizing this to enable arbitrary test cases that can be deterministic or quantitative based on LLMs as a judge and so on. But that's in a nutshell how that works. But I think for the purpose of this 2-day session, just vibe checks is the best way to go. Just playing around with it and seeing how it does. So, yeah.
Yeah, you were talking before Llama, which is open source, and you could really use in your own on-premises system.
Yeah.
So all this that you are offering right now is on the cloud.
Yes.
But do we have options to do any of this, to put it in your own implementation on premises? If you, for example, would like to have some, you may not want to share what the algorithm is learning from you. You want to have some kind of control, privacy on that.
Yes, so we do, and actually you can add your own custom endpoints. So let's say you've built your own, even if it's just on your own bare metal server, or if it's on your own AWS account or your own GCP account, then basically you can expose this as an endpoint, and you can then add this into your workflow. And that includes if you've done a fine-tuned model. You can add the endpoint for your fine-tuned model. You can actually build a router on top of your fine-tuned model, benchmark it, and so on. And also, but that is a way of plugging in your own endpoint into our server. We also do have on-prem options for enterprises, basically. Yeah, you can have the whole thing deployed in your own VPC, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
What are your usage limits?
Sorry?
Usage limits?
We have pretty high usage limits. We've got good relationships with the different providers, so we can do several thousand requests per second with most of them. So, yeah. You're not going to hit usage limits, thankfully. Yeah. Any other questions at all? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you might get this question a lot, but you mentioned that you use a model to evaluate the models.
Yes.
How do you know that the model that you're using to evaluate the models is good? And are there other ways of assessing the performance of models other than using models?
Yes, definitely. Great question. So when it comes to doing things at scale and things that are slightly more generative, then it is quite hard to do things at scale without using models. We tested a lot of different models. We tested all the Anthropic models, the Gemini models, and so on. The one that had the least bias was, as of yet, GPT-4. I think Claude thought that Haiku was way better than GPT 3.5, and I thought it was way better than GPT-4, sorry, which is not true. So GPT-4 was the least biased from the experiments we did, but actually what we're now doing is that there was a paper from Cohere a few months ago called LLMs as juries instead of LLMs as judges, and what they show is that by using a larger number of smaller models and having them all vote on the best and then aggregating those with an average, you get less bias in the responses, and it's actually better and more aligned with human preferences. So that's something we've exposed in the API, so you can actually use a mixture of LLMs. It's still not still LLMs, but it's at least a mixture of them from different providers and less biases. But of course, it depends on the task. So that's a great question. We have the ability to do client-side evaluations, and to be honest, a lot of the people we're working with have, it's not one score, it's many test cases. It's does the, let's say you're generating code, does the code compile? Does it pass the code's unit tests? Is it readable based on the doc strings that were added? And if you're doing generative stuff, it's not just like how good is this blog post, it's like how truthful is this blog post, how clear is the blog post, how good is the language, and so on. So the typical setup is to have lots of different evaluation metrics, which can either be binary, yes or no, or they can be like scored, and to look at all of those and then start to work out which input prompts are struggling, which ones are doing well on all of these evals. So it becomes very, very complicated when people build these big systems. But as a broad sweeping proxy, LLM as a judge with a general prompt gives you something reasonable, basically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When you're doing LLM as judge for the score, because I suppose most of the time doing whatever, but do you, I don't know yet the effects of sort of giving it an example. If you're doing a Likert scale, for example, do you tend to give them, and this is what a 1 is, this is what a 5 is, or do you just sort of let it do?
Yes. So great question. So at the moment, we basically have a relatively generic prompt, which is something like, given that this is the question, if the dataset has a reference answer, like given this is the question, given this is a good reference answer, how good was this response? Bearing in mind that it should be accurate, it should be descriptive, it should be clear. Think out loud as you're doing your reasoning, so kind of chain of thought. And then we basically have, here is, the answers are totally relevant, bad, okay, good, very good, and like a few examples. But if you really want to get the performance better, as you're saying, you do need to have what are called in-context examples. So you really want to be able to say, well, here's 5 examples of what irrelevant looks like. Here's 5 examples of what okay looks like. Here's 5 examples of what great looks like. And the more you can do that, the more that you're distilling your own knowledge about the task into the judge, and the better the judging is going to be. So yeah, that's exactly what you should be doing if you want to really get the very best performance. Yeah. Yeah.
How does the judging thing extend to agentic systems where you've got different models maybe working together on tasks, specialized roles?
Yeah, great question. These are very technical questions, actually. I maybe misjudged the audience. Great question. So, yeah, the way that we do that at the moment is we backtrack everything to the end, to the final task. So basically, if you imagine you have this agentic system where it's effectively a graph with several nodes in the graph, one thing you could do is judge the intermediate output, basically. But that's not great, because obviously if you have an agentic system, the only thing that matters is is it solving my task? And everything that's an intermediate output is just a means to the end of the final thing. So what you really want to be doing is saying, here's the output of this intermediate node in the agentic system. Did I close the sale, or did the code compile, or whatever? And then trying to learn through the graph is the best way of doing this. Very complicated, though. It's not easy at all. And yeah, for now, most of our customers have been focusing on kind of zero-shot individual LLMs, but yeah, that's the way that you need to think about it. Because sorry, this is a long answer, but agentic systems, the only thing that matters is the input and the final output of the task, and everything else is like a latent variable that is only trying to solve the final task. So that's how to think about it. Yeah, any other questions from anybody? Okay, cool. So what I know also, I've not been tracking the time, so probably getting close to, or maybe even surpassing my 15 minutes, so I'll just wrap up the notebook. So yeah, the other thing I was just going to close with is the fact that, so hopefully, and again, I can share this notebook with everybody afterwards, but yeah, so getting access to all these different models and providers is the starting point, using the client, like so. But if you want to then have this interactive back and forth, this kind of like ChatGPT style interaction, then basically you can use our chat client, where you just do this. It's just unify.chat.chatbot. You pass in model at provider. You then pass in the API key as before. And then what you actually get is this interactive session, like with ChatGPT, but you can do this again with any of the models and any of the providers that are out there. So let's have a chat. I don't know, what should we chat about? What is the capital of Spain? Let's do that. Hopefully it knows. I assume so. What is the capital of Spain? Let's see how good I am at typing with one hand. So yeah, capital of Spain is Madrid. Great. Top points. And then just to show that it's kind of got the statefulness, so that it's remembering the previous answers. Let's say I don't know, who is the most. Let me just quickly type 2 hands. Famous sports player. Famous sports player. from that country. Yeah, I mean, just basically showing that it remembers the previous question. And what you can actually do here, if you want to play around with things, what was it saying?
No.
Okay, I'm not sure about that. I don't agree. So yeah, let's just pause that. And what you can then actually do is continue the chat with a new provider. So in this case, we're going to set Gemini 1.5 Flash again as the provider. We've paused it, so what you can actually do is you can either pause or you can quit if you want to stop it entirely. So in this case, we've paused it. Let's rerun this, set it as a different endpoint, and continue the chat. Again, I don't know what I asked last time, but I think maybe the politician. Yeah, so basically showing that you can preserve the chat history and context across different models and providers and kind of switch them in halfway through, just to kind of play around with these things. And then once you're done, you can just quit. So again, I would suggest, obviously, there's a lot of features that Unify provides, but I think it may be a strange thing for me to say, but I would probably advise not trying to dive into the routing and the benchmarking and stuff, because there's a lot to take in, and in a 2-day kind of hackathon, I think the biggest advantage this can give is the ability just to very quickly vibe check the different models providers in a single interface without needing to build a load of infrastructure, and to do that in a few lines of code. So hopefully it's useful. And the other thing I was going to say is for whoever, is there like a winner at the end, or is it all just does everybody win? Well,
everyone gets a participation trophy.
Okay. Well, everybody. Okay. Well, there's.
Somebody was going to offer credits, weren't they?
We have free credits for somebody, so I'll let you decide who and when they should be allocated. But we can give $100 free credits to maybe the most impressive or the most fun. I'll let you decide
I
that.
think we said 200, but you know.
Okay, 200. Sorry, 200. 2,000. Scratch that. Delete that part of the recording. That's never happened. Anyway, thank you very much for having me, and yeah, really great to be part of this. Thank you very much.